We're going to get into a slightly different topic. Bill Visser and I are going to try to weave our way through the application of class rules and how they apply to racing with PHRF. To give you a little bit of background, we are going to be using the term class in a different fashion than we have in the past. A class under PHRF Lake Ontario is, as we've described, a boat that has a particular name. That would be a CNC 29, a J80, a Pearson 26. That would be a class under PHRF. A class under the racing rules of sailing is more loosely defined as a group of boats that race under the same design rules and are governed by the class documents. This would obviously include the Lightning, the Snipe, the Laser, but it also includes any handicapping system, PHRF Lake Ontario, PHRF Chesapeake, IRC, ORC. Under the racing rules of sailing, these are all considered to be classes. The SRC, or the standard class rules, is a form document that is commonly used to define the class. It will include, among other things, it will include measurements, requirements for crew, weight, approved manufacturers, things like that. And included in that document are two very important, or a very important point, and that is to whether the class rule is open or closed. Closed class rule would be common among most one design classes. Again, the Lightning is a closed rule. The Jet 14 is a closed rule, any of these other boats. Closed rules essentially are where anything not specifically permitted is prohibited. An open class rule is where anything is allowed unless it's prohibited. And I think in general, PHRF Lake Ontario comes under an open class rule. The Handicapper's manual is and the issuance of a certificate is pretty much deemed to be a boat in compliance with the PHRF Lake Ontario class rules. But we do have quite a bit of flexibility in its application, how far we can go in using the numbers, and what forms of racing can be adapted to it. Bill, would you elaborate on this a little bit if you want, and kind of explain to us what that all means and how we can apply it?
Yeah, actually, back here. I'm not sure how. Can I share my screen, Diane? I'm going to try it and see what happens. Okay. All right, what I have here is, oops. Can everybody see that okay? I got a diagram of documents that govern our race. This is from a presentation that was recently done by Irene McNeil, just to recap everything. And while it is for Sail Canada, it applies internationally. This is the hierarchy of how the rate rules go. So yeah, the racing rules, your national prescriptions, class rules, rating system. The thing to remember is that the class rules there, it's either, for us, it's either the PHRF as a class or the individual class. So if you're racing one design, the thing here is it's one or the other, not both at the same time. So this is where you've got to watch out where you're going with that. Now, as Bill said, when we have the ODR, one design rating, then that's when class rules do come into effect, but you've got to watch out for that one. That is really what I wanted to say for the class rules at the moment, and I guess we'll cover some other stuff in a little bit.
Very good. Appreciate that. In addition to this, I want to get into the fact that the club handicapper should be a part of the race organization. So often I will go to a meeting of the organizers for whatever regatta it is, and we're kind of wrapping things up now, but they're all through the winter we have these organizational meetings, and And perf is very often an afterthought. We really don't get a seat at the table unless we say, I want a seat at the table. And it really is very important that we do have input into how these things are done. The notice of race, the sailing instructions, how we're going to interpret the class rules, what variations we're going to put on the regatta under the Perf Lake Ontario class rules. And that is not to mention the fact that we need to have a technical committee assigned, which are responsible in essence for enforcing the class rules. And then on top of that, of course, there's help with scoring and generating valid certificates and all kinds of stuff that the handicapper can add to a regatta. And this doesn't necessarily have to apply to an event regatta like Lyra, but it's also a good idea for the handicapper to be a part of the organization of the Wednesday night races, because there are all sorts of things that come up. With all of that said, I want to make the handicappers in the group and others aware of some of the restrictions that we do have on the system. Perf Lake Ontario is a proprietary, has proprietary information. The numbers that we generate are not open to the public. They are for use of our handicappers and members. We realize that it is virtually impossible to prevent use outside of the system. The numbers are there, the old numbers are published, all sorts of reasons. And while we will sit around the table at the executive meetings and even central council, how can we plug these holes? It's an endless job, and I'm not sure that it's ever going to be 100% successful. Be aware too that the Handicappers worksheet, as we said before, is a tool that is intended to generate a perf certificate. It's not intended for the organizers to take the handicap, the worksheet, rather the Handicappers worksheet, and generate numbers for the fleet. And then, well, okay, we got numbers, so we don't need to be a part of perf. That's not the intention of that. Though I know, again, it's used that way. To reinforce that, and I'm gonna briefly read it just so that the handicappers are aware of the requirement. And it comes under the general requirements 7.1.3.2. I know your eyes are going to glaze over, but I'm going to read it anyway. Point 3 under this is that the handicappers shall administer the handicapping system in conjunction with Perf Lake Ontario to the mutual benefit of the organization. Part 4 of that is the member and their handicappers will use their access to Perf Lake Ontario's proprietary information for the specific purposes of issuing valid certificates to all participants in a racing event. Use of Perf LO's proprietary data to provide a handicap rating without compensation to the organization is contrary to the mutual benefit of the organization. That's the requirement. I know when we apply some of these things, and I'm as much interested in getting racers on the race course as anybody. In fact, once in a while I have some of the cruisers that hide from me because they know I'm going to say, "Why aren't you out racing with us?" So these things are for interpretation. We do have the ability to have 2 races that somebody will actually participate in and be scored with before the certificate is necessary to be paid for. The third certificate, as a result of a submitted race, will be charged for. The trial period is a good thing. I know racers don't necessarily all want to commit and buy the certificate. I know a $40 Canadian, I don't know, what is that now? $10 American, something like that. I don't know what it costs now, but it's not an expensive thing, but I know there is some resistance. So that's what I'm going to say about that. And it's something that is very important. Again, it's something we discuss all the time, but it's not something that we want to go any further with. I think I've made my point. can I open this up just briefly, maybe to Diana or Brian, in terms of the actual requirements of getting the PERF certificate? Or have we covered that enough? Brian, what do you think? Do you have any further observations?
There. I think that you covered it well. We, as an organizer, you need to tell the people that they need that certificate, and if they don't have it, they're going to have to get it. If it's not anything we need to make a decision on, like you have a pretty standard boat that we have lots of in the PHRF fleet, you come to the regatta and we measure it up or whatever, and you can buy a certificate that will then submit. If it's not, then we should say no, because that has to go through the process of being a unique boat that we don't have in our database. So, but that's how it goes back to the organizer.
Okay, and Diana, we do during the racing season have the ability to expedite certificates if they are necessary, do we not? And I think you're aware of the imperatives of doing that. So yeah, we can get a certificate issued if required and are reasonably quickly.
Yeah, so I'll just go on that real quick. Yeah, you can ask for basically an expedited certificate. And that, because our normal time frame and the thing that our admin office, Sheena, we are given up to a week to get your certificate issued. If you need it for an event, we are well aware of the events that go on the lake, and that there will be last minute requests. As long as it's a class of boat that is rated and that can be looked up online, you can get a certificate pretty much immediately. But there is a fee for that. We do charge $20 expedited fee to get that done. But I mean, everything's on the web, so it just, everything comes through us. We process it. We just make an effort to, we kind of basically push your request to the top of the list, but there is a fee for that.
Very good. I know as a personal story, we have the Scotch Bonnet race, which I'm involved with every year, and this was a perfect example where PERF was a complete afterthought. And we have now set up a process where we will, through Genesee Yacht Club, issue a certificate for a boat. We have a guy that comes up from Cuba Lake every year, and one other guy that comes. They trailer their boats up from these small Finger Lakes and come up to race with us. So we have, even though they're not members of the club, we have decided that we will issue a certificate under Genesee Yacht Club's membership. And I think we are discussing as well, though this isn't maybe not quite ready for publication, but we are discussing as well the ability to have individual certificates. I guess that's already, Diana, that's pretty much already in place, right? We can have an individual certificate applied for. Can you really fast go through that with us? If a boat is not a member of a club or an organization.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh no, we have what we call non-member certificate holders. I have quite a database of them. If it's a member who's not a member at a club, they do pay the fee for the certificate directly to us. That can be handled by check. We usually, I mean, if there's time, normally what happens is we will issue a PayPal invoice for the full amount. The owner pays us, and then that owner stays in our database. The certificate stays there. I actually send out renewal notices to these owners every year.
There we
so
go.
they could renew.
So there are ways around this, and I know I have sat at a registration table where people have not had one, and under these circumstances, you don't want to turn them away. And so if you can in any way get their certificate, I've measured sales in a parking lot before a regatta, and that's all part of it.
Bill,
Yeah.
before we move on, did we want to make it a little easier for people to understand how in the notice of race, they can sort of like tell people you need to make these arrangements to in advance. Do you want to do that now or do you want to do that later?
No, we'll do it now.
Alrighty, okay, alrighty.
The next thing is let me introduce you, Bill. My next thing here is how to apply these things and what to put in the notice of race. So, Bill, I don't want to surprise you with this question, but how do we apply these things to the notice of race?
Carefully. Oh, you want more detail? Okay. All right. So you remember the picture I showed earlier on showing the hierarchy of where the rules are. What you have to remember is that the per fellow rule and by extension, the notice of race and sailing instructions are all part of the definition of the rules. So the easiest way to do this is, as we all know, and I'm sorry, I'm also a race management instructor here for Sail Canada. So I'm pulling stuff that we normally teach there. Thing to remember is the notice of race is effectively your invitation. Oh, sorry, that's my phone. Is the invitation of two competitors to compete. And the way you let them know that it's going to be used perf and they should get a perf certificate is in the notice of race. Now, a lot of people like to put it in the rules section. The better place to put it is in the section for eligibility and entry, because this is where you identify which boats are invited, which boats with valid certificates are invited, and this is where you would say boats with valid PHRF LO certificates are invited to attend. And you can add a sentence about, if you do not have one, please contact the organizing authority and we will make arrangements to get one for you if possible. You know, that's it. You leave that little caveat, but you put that at that point. And then you could also put in, if you feel inclined, that the PHRF LO handicap system will be used. Now, the wording in our manual does say that this is the rule and this is what you should be doing, and these are the defaults. If you want to deviate from that, this is also where you would say if there's going to be a change on that. So the key is notice of race, which boats are invited, which boats with valid certificates. That's the key. The valid certificates are invited. And if it's not obvious by that point that we're using PHRF LO, then PHRF LO is the handicap system to be used. This is what you would need to be able to put. If you put those things in, then you'll be able to, you know, nobody can show up and say, well, I didn't know I needed a certificate. Yeah, the notice of race, which is the invitation to attend, it told you up front, you better get this in line. So that is, to me, the easiest way to put that type of information out. Have I thoroughly confused that point, Bill?
No, actually, you clarified it. I understand you, and I can understand you probably.
Yeah, but do racers understand?
Well, I don't know. Well, of course, you know, Bill and I have a lot of fun. We're both, I guess, essentially regional race officers and instructors, and we don't always agree on everything. But
you will come around.
Normally, he comes around to my way of thinking without too much trouble. What? No, that's great. That's what's in the notice of race. We're going to get into a couple of the rules that we are enforcing, getting a little more specific. But there's a perfect example of having this in the notice of race and making sure that the organizers are aware of what is required. I think it's becoming a little bit better, but in the past 10 years ago, I would say that like there was never a thought given to perf and the implementation of the certificates. So,
and I think the fact that the club measurer is, by definition, the technical committee and should be seen at the club as the technical committee, I think is going to be helpful for doing this. So
we will get into the technical committee in a minute.
Yep.
While in front of me, I have copies of these rules, and I don't think we necessarily want to read these rules.
Bill, I think that Brian is waving his hand like crazy.
Brian, sorry.
He's trying to interject here. He has this halo above his head. So
here you go. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
All right. Sorry. Just one more thing that might happen that you could encounter is somebody from Lake Erie comes along and wants to race in your regatta. And he doesn't have PHRF, or she doesn't have a PHRF certificate, but they have a pretty standard boat, like say a Kirby 30 or a J80 or whatever. And so our customary rule has been an association that we have an agreement with, which we do with Lake Erie, and we do with Montreal, the lower St. Lawrence Basin, is we give them, we see their certificate that it's valid and make sure their measurements are right, like if they have an oversized jib adjustment or whatever, and we give them our standard number for that, Lake Ontario number. It may differ from their number.
Great, very good. That's a good point. Now, does Owen, are
Yeah, they
you,
don't have to buy a new certificate because they're in our association together.
right,
So at the regatta last year at Lyra, we normally get anywhere from 2 to 4 J80s showing up from Lake Erie. And as I said, we work with Lake Michigan on some boats because they have a different fleet mix than we do. But yeah, we'll take their certificate, we'll look at the ASP adjustments, which are different on different lakes. So a lot of lakes use 3 seconds, we use 1. But we'll shift over the SP number to the Lake Ontario SP. We'll apply the measurements into our certificate calculations and give them a Lake Ontario one. And then they'll ask us why the numbers are so different. We'll say, hey, different conditions, different observations, etc. But we'll do a straight transfer. It's almost like transferring a driver's license or something.
I was just going to say,
We don't get a certificate for them, but we just translate it what we would do if we were going to give them a certificate. We give them our number.
Yeah, and one other point, when we're doing an initial assessment or something, we can also go the other way and look at how a boat is rated elsewhere and figure out how the same boat would rate on Lake Ontario. And there's going to be differences because our rules are not uniform in North America.
right, well, that's another point. And if we have time, perhaps at the end, and there's any interest, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of times someone will come along, Perf New England publishes their numbers very freely, and someone will come along and say, well, my number is X with New England, how come it's not on Lake Ontario? And that's another topic, but and if we feel it's good, if we have time, maybe we can get into it.